Cave explorers of Reddit, what's the closest you've ever come to dying? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Growing up in the LA suburbs, my brother and I used to explore the storm drain ditches and tunnels. The biggest one ran under several cities, starting in the hills as a 5-foot pipe and ending as 3 parallel concrete tunnels, each big enough to drive a moving truck through. Once we put our bikes down there and rode the whole length underground, emerging near the Dominguez Channel almost at sea level. When we saw the sunlight at the end, we all started racing our bikes as fast as we could. As soon as we rode out into the sunlight, we discovered algae more slippery than ice coated the entire width and ended up in a huge pileup with gross green algae ground into concrete rash. The time we could have died, the pumps were running to a drain, a sump, dumping probably acre feet per hour into the 7 by 7 foot square tunnel from a 5-foot diameter pipe. This resulted in higher than knee-deep water downstream of the branch. As 14 to 15-year-olds at the peak of idiot drive for adventure, but before good risk assessment skills had developed, we seriously considered wading through anyway, expecting it to get lower where the tunnel widened a ways. Fortunately, we decided to turn back that day. As an adult, I've explored a lot of old mine shafts in the mountains and deserts. In several, there were stopes, or steep shafts, going straight down 30 to 100 feet, with only a few rickety old boards across one side as a bridge. Falling down one of these is a common cause of mine explorer death. Not cave, but mine exploring. Was exploring an old lead mine. It was relatively well known, but I had gone in via an adit much lower down the hillside than the normally used entrance, planning to see the lower workings not normally accessible from the top adit. After a little way, I came to what I thought was the base of a stope I had seen before from the upper entrance. A stope is a vertical or near vertical working, often spanning several levels where a seam of ore has been cut out of the rock. Making my way along this for a little way, 20 or 30 meters, marveling at the flowstone deposits, I suddenly felt the floor of the stope spring a little. The floor was covered in centuries of mud and debris, as is normal in mines. I froze and scraped the mud on the floor with my boot. Wood. Old rotten wood. F. It wasn't the base of the stope. I was on a wooden false floor. God knows how far down it goes. Could be 4 feet, could be 40. I have never known fear like I did then as I tried to gently retrace my steps back, putting my feet on old boot prints until I cleared the stope. 100-plus-year-old water-soaked wood was all that was between me and what could have been a massive drop onto God knows what. This was when I was much younger and invincible. About an hour into a cave, I was going through a narrow chasm that was just wide enough to turn sideways and slide through it. If you took a cross-section of the chasm, it would look like a series of hourglass shapes stacked on top of each other. The top was wide. It narrowed greatly near my chest, wide by my hips, and then narrow by my feet. About 30 feet into the chasm, the bottom drops away, and I have to press my feet outward against the walls of the chasm to hold me up while I'm still turned sideways, sliding through the upper narrow portion. I can't really see my feet or what I'm pressing against to hold me up, so I'm kind of just feeling my way forward. Eventually, one foot slips immediately followed by the other, and I drop down a few inches, and I catch myself on my wrists and elbows along with the bottoms of my rib cage on the skinny part of the hourglass. My position won't give me enough leverage with my arms to pull myself up, so I'm feeling around with my feet for something to stand on. I'm concerned, but not freaking out. But I'm also not able to find something to stand on. Eventually, my arms start getting tired, and I start sliding deeper into the skinny part of the hourglass. As I slide lower, I realize that each time I exhale, I drop down an inch, and the skinny part of the hourglass is starting to prevent me from fully inhaling. That realization that I can't breathe freely triggered a bit of panic, and I start frantically kicking, looking for something to stand on, which just causes me to slide deeper. So I'm starting to freak out, and I'm stuck, taking half breaths, and I'm thinking I'm either going to get stuck and suffocate, or I'm going to pass out and drop down into the chasm that I can't see the bottom of. I don't know why it dawned on me, but I put one foot against one wall and the other foot against the opposite side and just pressed as hard as I could to give myself leverage to push myself up and catch my breath. I ended up just using that feet against the wall method to just scoot my way forward until I got to where the floor came back up and I could stand and rest. Maybe not death, but brain damage for sure. It was one of my first times exploring, so I was equally confident and stupid. I got to a very narrow crevice and had to remove all my gear to slide through, including my helmet. My dumbass got something in my eye and jerked away thinking it was rocks falling. Well, when you jerk your head in a very enclosed space, it turns into a pinball. Every time I hit my head, I reeled in pain, then hitting the opposite wall. You'd think my reasoning would kick in after the first few hits, but I was dumb. It was as embarrassing as it was painful. Left me super disoriented and throbbing, so I turned back for the day after rest. A few cuts, but mostly some bruising. Crawling over a crevasse with just enough room on either side for hands and knees. No way to know if it ended. Death below. Brother with broken lamp behind me. Rest of group left with the pack. Dragging myself through a tube with my elbows and not enough room to crawl. Chubby woman with broken lamp behind me crying the entire time. If it dead-ended, so did we. Again, somehow separated from group with no pack. Not sure how we got separated that time, so I take the blame. Lost going in circles, first time. Not really dying, but I was descending using a rope and couldn't see the ground. I was also short and it was dark. Because of this, I had wrapped the rope around my wrist a few times on my descent. At the bottom end of the rope, I spent a solid 10 to 15 agonizing seconds with the rope caught around my wrist, supporting all my weight. Straight out of an adventure movie or something, just dangling by my wrist. I slid about 2 feet down and touched the ground and had a sore wrist. Sucks being short. I'm no cave explorer, but I do know of a small cave behind a waterfall. I was hanging out in there and suddenly the whole thing was being filled with water. I crawled out, but if I was any less physically capable, I don't think I would have made it because the water pressure was too great and was sucking me to the back of the cave and pinning me down. I went cave diving at Vortex Springs in Florida in the 90s. I think they have closed it off now, but back then you could go down to like 115 feet, and there was an air bell down there that you could go into and take your regulator and mask off and talk. I definitely had nitrogen narcosis at about 100 feet. I was feeling euphoric the whole time. On the way back up, as the narcosis wore off, I was feeling like I just dodged a bullet. Around February of 2018, we experienced a decent amount of rainfall, enough to cause the water table to rise up into a nearby cave system that I've spent some time in. Some friends and I decided on taking a bit of a swimming expedition through some tunnels that we knew wouldn't be completely put underwater. We came up to one crawl, an easy one, 2.5 feet or so between the ground and the ceiling. So normally we'd just crawl through on our hands and knees. Water had gotten high enough to fill all but the last 2 to 3 inches below the ceiling. In hindsight, an incredibly stupid move, but we floated on our backs through the tunnel with our noses pressed against the stone ceiling in at least one spot. I had to almost completely submerge my face because of an outcrop on the ceiling. It opened up after about 20 feet, but that was one of the dumber things I've done in my time. Car wreck on the way to the cave. Other than cave diving, which is extremely unforgiving, caving is pretty darn safe. People have died, sure, pockets of toxic gas, falls, trapped by flash floods, but it is only a dangerous hobby compared to knitting. Even the cave-in newbies worry over at first are rare. You're dealing with geological time. Rock will fall from the ceiling of the chamber you're sometimes in the next 10,000 years. What are the odds that it's the 5 minutes you're underneath it? Small. Oh boy. I was traversing this interesting cave that intersected with a ravine and had a decent drop as far as I could see. Kinda dark, light wasn't bright enough. I found a narrow ledge and kept inching forward, but then out of nowhere a freaking baby zombie pushes me and I fall and live with half a heart. Crazy experience, dude. Almost lost my diamond stuff. I see what you did there. Never came close, and never going to. Here's why. There is a very popular cave nearby maintained by the park authority. It's only about 100 meters long, with a stream flowing through the length of it, and an easy exit halfway through if you've had enough. There are even signs explaining that this cave only goes one way, has no offshoots, and is impossible to get lost in. The second half after the exit plunged down deep into darkness, daylight quickly fading away. The last stretch leading to the exit has water up to within inches of the ceiling. Depending on the time of year, you can keep your whole head above water. Sometimes it is just your nose and mouth to breathe, before taking a short dunk under the rock for 1 meter at most, and you're back in broad daylight with all the other hikers right there. Knowing it's completely safe, it is still at the limits of my spelunking. Not me, but my oldest brother. He met a cougar face to face in a deep cavern. He was running and dropped all his stuff. He fell and his headlamp broke. He was in complete darkness, and then his foot got stuck. It was then he remembered the flares, took one out and lit it right as the cat was about to swipe him. Instead, it burned its paw and started circling my brother. He yanked on his foot and broke his ankle. He literally one leg hopped to the entrance. When he exited, the cat bit down on his leg. He's got a gnarly scar as proof. He took out another flare, burnt the hell out of his leg, but managed to stick it in the cat's mouth and get free. His campsite was right outside the cave, and he got out the darn gun and tranquilized the cat. But he shot it too many times and it stopped its heart. But to this day, that's his favorite story to tell and favorite scare to show at family events. One time, some other people in the same cave pulled out a gun and aimed it near me. They only heard some walking and probably thought it was something else. I never had anything else like that happen in the 274 years I was living in that cave. Luckily, they didn't see me. Young man. About 7 years ago, I was riding my quad, ATV, on a forestry road that had lots of elevation changes from 10 feet above the river to hundreds of feet up while riding. I'd keep drifting around every corner on a dirt road I didn't know and kept coming within mere feet of drop-offs that are over 400 feet down. So I'd say I came close to dying over 60 times that day, and I had told no one where I was going. I went cave dwelling a few years back. All went good until one of the pathways collapsed. There were several more ways than that one, thankfully, but I got all turned around until I eventually found a clearing where my father was standing, and in his hands were kitchen tongs. Safe to say, I nearly died from those tongs. I was playing on a giant mound of snow in a grocery store parking lot. Earlier in the day, it was sunny out, and now it was like 4 to 5 p.m., so it was dark and much colder, so a lot of ice formed from melting snow. I slipped at the very top and fell at least 6 to 7 feet straight onto my face, knocked myself out cold, broke some bones in my face. It was really scary. I thought I was going to break my neck or something. Another time, I got shot in the eye with an airsoft gun. I didn't think I was going to die that time, but I went blind for about 3 days. Everything was white out of that eye, and I had special eye drops, and my sight slowly came back.